welcome to a deep dive into Sapiens.
Yeah.
You sent over some excerpts from Yuval Noah Harari's book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
Right.
And I think it's safe to say you're ready to tackle some big questions about human history.
Yeah.
We're not just talking like dates and names,
Right.
but getting into the really fascinating stuff.
Mm.
Like why we do what we do, how our societies evolved, and what makes us unique.
Harari really does push us to rethink
Yeah.
who we are and how we got here.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that can really change your perspective on things that you might take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things that just blew my mind
Okay.
was this idea that humans weren't alone on this planet for a really long time.
Yeah.
We tend to think of ourselves as like the humans,
Right.
but it turns out there were other human species like coexisting alongside us.
Yeah.
Neanderthals, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't just our ancestors, they were more like our siblings.
Yeah, that really challenges this kind of linear view of evolution that we have in our minds. So it's more like a family tree
Yeah.
with all these branches
Okay.
that represent different human species.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And just imagine for a second if Neanderthals had survived.
Yeah.
Would our view of ourselves
Wow.
be completely different?
Yeah.
Would we see ourselves
That's
as special?
an alternate reality
Yeah.
opens up
Yeah.
when you think about that.
Yeah.
Speaking of mind-blowing ideas,
Yeah. Okay.
Harari also talks about this paradox with our big brains.
Yeah.
And, it's obviously a defining characteristic of our species.
Of course.
But it seems like it came with some baggage.
It did. It did.
Yeah.
We often think about having a large brain as being purely advantageous,
Right.
but evolution often involves trade-offs.
Okay.
And for humans, childbirth became much more dangerous
Oh, yeah.
for human females because of the large skull size of infants.
And not to mention, human babies are just so incredibly dependent.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to other mammals that
right.
can, walk
Yeah.
almost immediately.
Yeah.
Or, start foraging for food.
Yeah.
Ours are just helpless.
Helpless for years.
For years.
And that dependency had a huge impact on human society.
Yeah.
Think about childcare.
Okay.
Think about how long parents have to invest in their children.
Yeah.
The formation of social structures and support systems,
Mhm.
even the length of childhood itself,
Yeah.
it's all influenced by this.
Right.
So those big brains really set us on a very different path
Totally.
than other animals.
It's so fascinating how something
Right.
that seems purely biological
Mm.
can have these profound social and cultural
I know.
implications.
It's amazing.
So we've got these big brains. We're taking care of these helpless babies for years.
Right. Yeah.
How do we go from that to building these complex societies?
Yeah.
Harari suggests that it's our unique ability to believe in fictions,
Yeah.
things that don't physically exist,
That's right.
that allowed us to cooperate in large numbers
Right.
and build something bigger than ourselves.
That's such a fundamental concept in the book.
Yeah.
This idea that humans create these shared myths.
Yeah.
Money, nations, corporations,
Yeah.
and these things only exist in our collective imagination,
Right.
but they shape our reality in a very real way.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And he uses this example of Peugeot,
Right.
the car company.
Yeah.
Legally, it's a fiction.
Yeah.
We've created this narrative where an entity,
Right.
not a person, can have rights and responsibilities and own property.
That's right.
It's like ancient myths,
Yeah.
but with modern lawyers
Yeah.
as the powerful sorcerers
Yeah.
crafting these complex stories.
It really highlights the distinct human capacity for large-scale cooperation
Yeah.
based on something intangible. And that's what allowed us to go from these small bands of hunter-gatherers
Yeah.
to sprawling empires
Yeah.
and global corporations.
So we've got big brains, we're storytelling creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and then bam, the agricultural revolution.
Yes.
I think most people see agriculture as this positive turning point,
Right?
but Harari kind of presents this provocative idea that it was actually a trap,
It was.
leading to more work,
Mm-hmm.
a less diverse diet.
Yeah. It's easy to view it as progress.
Right.
But he argues that it was a trap because while there were short-term gains,
Okay.
agriculture ultimately led to greater complexity and specialization in
Okay.
society.
Okay.
And that actually made people more vulnerable
Wow.
to things like famine and disease,
Oh.
and also more susceptible to exploitation by those in power.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was so fascinated by the example of Göbekli Tepe,
Yeah.
which is this site with these amazing structures that predate agriculture.
That's
And what's so interesting is it suggests that humans were already capable of complex social organization
They were.
before farming came along.
Yes.
This really challenges that simple narrative of agriculture as like the driver of progress,
Exactly.
doesn't it?
It does.
It raises these questions about the true cost
Yeah.
of this transition.
Yeah, were early farmers actually better off in the long run?
Right.
And how does that change how we view progress today?
It really makes you rethink those
He
assumptions.
does.
And here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Harari points out that human societies,
Yeah.
regardless of time or place,
Yeah.
are built on these imagined hierarchies.
That's right.
Whether it's based on class,
Regenerative
gender,
race.
or race. It's so important to understand history
Yeah.
in order to examine those narratives
Okay.
and the power structures that they create.
Right.
It forces us to ask, are these hierarchies based on some kind of inherent truth?
Right.
Or are they simply stories that we tell ourselves
Yeah.
to maintain order
Oh, yeah.
and power?
The examples are so varied.
They are.
You know, he's got Hammurabi's code
Right.
in ancient Babylon.
Yeah.
This established this rigid social order where a person's worth was literally measured in silver.
Right.
Men were valued higher than women.
Yeah.
Slaves were at the bottom.
It's a clear illustration of how these hierarchies
Yeah.
became embedded in law and social norms.
Yeah, and then you've got something like the American Declaration of Independence,
Yeah.
you know, which proclaims equality,
Right.
but originally excluded large segments of the population from its vision of freedom.
Right.
And of course, there's the caste system in India,
Yeah.
which continues to shape lives despite efforts to dismantle it.
Yeah.
It's almost as if these stories about who's superior
Yeah.
and who's inferior have a life of their own
They do.
and persist across generations.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and that brings us to this question of how these hierarchies sustain themselves over time.
Yeah.
What does their persistence tell us about our own biases and assumptions about social order?
It's a really good question.
Yeah,
We've got to figure that out.
we do.
So we've got these hierarchies playing out within societies,
Right.
but we also see this historical trend of smaller cultures merging into larger ones,
Yeah,
ultimately leading to our interconnected world today.
right.
And a big driver of that, according to Harari, was the power of money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The evolution of money from bartering to precious metals to modern currencies is just fascinating.
It is.
It shows how abstract ideas can have this profound impact
Yeah.
on human interactions and global systems.
It started with simple things,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like barley being used as currency in ancient Mesopotamia.
Right.
But then you have gold and silver
Yeah.
becoming these universally accepted forms of wealth, partly because of their properties,
Right.
but also because people trusted them.
That trust is key. We agree to exchange goods and services for these tokens because we believe others will do the same.
Right.
It's this collective belief
Yeah.
that underpins the entire global economy.
But as powerful as money is,
Yeah.
Harari reminds us it's not the only force at play.
It's not.
He talks about the power of empires
Right.
imposing their will through conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to the scientific revolution, which he argues is closely linked to European imperialism.
This is a complex and often uncomfortable aspect of history.
Yeah.
You know, we celebrate scientific advancements,
Right.
but it's crucial to acknowledge that science was often used to justify and support
Right.
colonial expansion.
Oh, yeah.
The pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of power went hand in hand.
It's like Captain James Cook's Voyager.
Exactly.
On one hand, there were scientific expeditions
Yeah.
gathering valuable data.
Right.
But on the other hand, they laid the groundwork for British colonization and the exploitation of indigenous peoples.
It's a complicated legacy.
It is.
It challenges us to consider the ethical and historical context of scientific progress.
Right.
You know, how has the pursuit of knowledge been used for good and bad?
Yeah.
And how does that impact how we approach science today?
Right.
You know?
So we've seen how the pursuit of knowledge can have this or dark side.
Right.
But does that mean that progress inevitably leads to unhappiness?
Okay.
Harari dives into this idea that happiness might depend more on our expectations
Right.
than on objective conditions.
It's a fascinating question.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
He argues that happiness might be more about
Okay.
how much we think we should have rather than what we actually possess.
So it's not about how much we have,
Yeah.
but how much we feel we're entitled to.
Exactly. He uses the example of winning the lottery. It brings this surge of joy at first,
Sure.
but studies show that lottery winners eventually return to their baseline level of happiness.
Wow.
And the same goes for people who suffer debilitating accidents.
Okay.
You know, they often adjust to their new reality and find a new balance for their happiness.
That's so interesting. It's like our brains recalibrate based on what we come to expect.
Exactly.
So even with more wealth, better healthcare, all these modern conveniences, if our expectations rise even faster, we might not feel any happier.
Precisely.
Wow.
And that raises a crucial point about how we measure progress.
Okay.
If our goal is simply to accumulate more and achieve higher standards of living, it might not actually lead to greater overall happiness.
So then what should we be striving for? If not material wealth and technological advancements, then what?
That's a question that takes us into the realm of philosophy. Harari doesn't provide easy answers, but he does challenge us to think about the purpose of all this progress. Is it just about living longer and increasing our power, or is there something more?
And just when you thought things couldn't get any more mind-blowing, he throws in this whole discussion about the potential for biological engineering and the creation of superhumans.
He uses the example of Alba, this genetically modified rabbit that glows in the dark. It's a seemingly lighthearted example, but it highlights the incredible potential of genetic engineering to alter life itself.
It evokes those classic sci-fi scenarios of designer babies and enhanced humans. But this isn't science fiction anymore.
No.
These technologies are becoming our reality.
They are.
And with that comes this wave of ethical questions.
Of course.
What limits, if any, should we impose on these technologies? What does it mean to be human when we have the power to alter our very nature?
It's like we're on the verge of becoming gods. But as Harari points out, humanity's track record isn't exactly spotless.
That's true.
You know, we've caused immense suffering to other animals. And even our own species. So if we become gods, what kind of gods will we be?
That's the challenge he leaves us with.
It is.
We have this incredible power.
We do.
And with that comes immense responsibility. The choices we make now will determine not only our future, but potentially the future of all life on Earth.
That's
okay. So far, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the origins of human society to the power of imagined realities, the impact of the agricultural and industrial revolutions, and now this mind-bending potential of biotechnology. What other threads or themes stood out to you as we explored these excerpts?
One thing that really struck me is how much of human history has been shaped by factors that are, in a sense, arbitrary. You know, why did Europe, which was relatively insignificant for much of history, become the dominant force in the scientific revolution and modern imperialism? It wasn't predetermined. It was a convergence of factors, including a particular mindset and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
It really makes you realize that things could have turned out very differently. There were no guarantees that the world would be structured the way it is today.
Exactly. And that makes it all the more important to understand how those historical events have shaped our present and to consider what other possibilities might exist as we move into the future.
You know what I find fascinating? Is this idea that the unification of humankind wasn't driven solely by economics or technology. It was also shaped by ideas and beliefs. Like the spread of monotheism and the concept of universal empires.
That's a crucial point.
It
highlights the power of of shared stories and ideologies to unite people, even across vast distances and cultural differences.
Makes you wonder what new stories will emerge in the future to shape our collective destiny.
It's a big question.
It's amazing to think about those stories shaping our collective destiny.
It is.
As we delve deeper into Sapiens. I'm struck by how Harari brings up these seemingly small details. They're just these fascinating facts.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that for most of human history, people didn't really stress about keeping precise time?
It's true.
Really?
Yeah. The concept of a rigid schedule is a relatively recent development.
Okay.
Largely a product of the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Before factories and mass production, life flowed more naturally.
Okay.
Guided by the rhythms of the sun and the seasons.
So like a more agrarian lifestyle.
Yeah.
Harari mentions how ancient cities might have had a single clock, if any, perched atop a tower.
Right.
And likely quite inaccurate.
Probably.
And today we're surrounded by clocks.
Everywhere.
Our phones, computers. Microwaves, we're constantly checking the time.
It's a perfect illustration of how technology can change our perception of time.
And consequently our behavior.
When the factory clock became the model.
It did.
Not just for work, but for schools.
The schools.
Hospitals. Even leisure time.
It's as if the Industrial Revolution synchronized us all.
Wow.
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of revolutions, Harari's perspective on the impact of industrialization on families and communities is really eye-opening.
It is.
What's fascinating is that for most of history, families and local communities formed the bedrock of society.
They did.
They provided everything, from education and healthcare to social support.
Yeah, and then the Industrial Revolution kind of shifted those roles.
Interesting.
To the state and the market.
So we transitioned from these close-knit groups to individuals navigating this new system.
Exactly.
On the one hand, it led to greater personal freedom and opportunities.
Of course.
But on the other hand, it created this sense of alienation and dependence on these larger impersonal systems.
And this ties back to the rise of imagined communities.
Right.
You know, nations and consumer brands emerged to fill that void.
Okay.
Offering a sense of belonging and identity in a fragmented world.
And fueling those imagined communities is another modern invention that Harari explores. Consumerism. This new ethic that promotes the idea that buying more is good, even a path to happiness.
It's a striking contrast to the traditional value placed on frugality. You know, consumerism encourages this constant desire for more, a need to treat ourselves, and chase that fleeting satisfaction from acquiring the next shiny object.
It's like that saying, keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly.
But on a global scale. Yeah, it makes you question whether all this consumption has truly increased our happiness, or if we're just stuck on this never-ending treadmill of wanting more.
It's a really good question.
It is,
and it circles back to Harari's central theme. What is the purpose of progress?
Yeah.
Where are we heading as a species?
Right.
Are we even asking the right questions?
That's the big word.
This deep dive has me asking myself, what stories am I buying into?
Right.
The stories I tell myself about who I am.
Yeah.
About society.
And what it means to live a good life.
About what it means to live a good life.
Because those stories clearly hold immense power.
They do.
They really do. And as we've discovered, those stories can change. They can be challenged.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most important takeaway from Harari's work is this: don't take anything for granted. Question your assumptions. Explore different perspectives. And keep asking those big uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
Because the future of humanity hinges on the choices we make today.
Well said.
Thank you.
That wraps up our deep dive into Sapiens.
It does.
I hope you've enjoyed this journey.
I have.
And that you'll continue exploring these ideas.
Me too.
And see where they lead you.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Oh.
Keep those brains buzzing.
Sounds good.
Did you get any of that?